So the next one is going to be Christina and Joe from Acxiom, and they are also presenting on identity and managing consent.
So while they're setting that up, oops. So I just want to introduce who we are. So my name is Christina Leung, and with me is Joe Shi. So I'm the product manager, and Joe is the head of engineering of Acxiom Research. So Acxiom Research is... Go ahead. So Acxiom Research is a group within a company that looks at technology research on new technologies as well as product ideation. We also act as an incubator for new products ideas within Acxiom. So what we're presenting today is Privacy Hub. Privacy Hub is one of our project initiatives within Acxiom. So the reason why we started looking into that is because Acxiom and LiveRamp manage a lot of data, a huge amount of data within our core business. And as a result of GDPR compliance and all other privacy compliance, we wanted to find a way to better manage consent and better manage the information that's flowed through the data supply chain, which is very core to our business. We look at different technologies. We reckon blockchain is a best fit to this solution because of all the characteristics and also the benefits from blockchain. So our focus is really in the resolving consent management and consent tracking throughout the data supply chain. So meaning from data collection, upon a user provide opt-in consent information through the data supply chain to the EdTech ecosystem. So the product vision of Privacy Hub is that it's a consortium that is going to be sitting in a permission-based blockchain network. And by consortium, I mean that you have data collectors, data providers, brand, advertisers, AdTech players, all contribute into this blockchain, where we track consumer data from start through the ecosystem all the way to using that data for campaign purpose. So there are three key components to Privacy Hub as a service component. So the first one is for an individual. So the idea is a consumer doesn't need to go everywhere to look at where the data has been sent to. So helping them to manage their consent management as well as exercising their data right. So for business, it's data movement tracking. So data provenance, enabling them to be compliant for the regulatory requirements. So the idea is having portals for regulator to be able to look at data movement for a particular company. So this within Privacy Hub, we are not going to collect any PII information. However, we are only using the consent ID to track consent from end to end. So there's no data that is PII related being stored within the Privacy Hub. Okay. So how does it fit into the TNC framework within IAB? So from what we see is IAB is focused in resolving the issues with the AdTech ecosystem, meaning whether we have consent to display, to serve an ad to a user. What we are focusing is from the data supply chain side of things, where we start from the beginning of when a consumer agrees to provide data, opt-in to provide the information for marketing purpose. So we believe that in order to integrate the solution together, we can have an identity resolution service in the middle where we'll be able to track all the way through from the data supply chain to the ad serving ecosystem there. So we believe that's how we can integrate that together. And with that product idea, what we have done so far is we've built a prototype, proof of concept prototype, because within the lab itself, we don't actually build products. So we have engineers building prototypes that prove that it works. So today, Joe is going to show us this prototype. And this is going to be the use case that we're going to show you. So we have a consumer here sign up and opt in for her favorite brand here, an advertiser also. So she opt in for her marketing information or personal information to be used for marketing purpose and also site personalization. So we believe in that case, we'll be writing that record into a distributed ledger with all the information that is captured there. Again, we're not capturing any PR information, but we are only capturing what type of information she agrees to provide for marketing purpose. With other information such as consent, whether it's opt-in, expiry, and what is the usage, the purpose for her data. So assuming our advertiser is working with an agency and they create an audience, and that audience information needs to be transferred to the agency for campaign. We are tracking the consent that's being flowed from the time when she signed up for her membership. So as the agency receives the data, he will write the record into the blockchain. And an agency works with a publisher to display ads for Martha, our consumer here. So there will be a transfer of audience. Again, we are tracking the consent that's being flowed from the source when she provides her information all the way to when she gets that ads online. So with that, I will give it to Joe.
Okay. I have a microphone. So we're going to show you, actually, it's a prototype network. Actually, can we go to the next? So it's, we created a 5-node network. Essentially, we want to make sure that we cover all the constituents. So as Christina said, we have regulators, data providers, agencies, publishers, everyone who needs to deal with consent and consumer data. Right? With GDPR, you need to, every one of these companies are required, if they have consumer information, to have to prove that actually consent is available. So on the left-hand side, you can see these are the reasons we chose blockchain. We actually implemented this proof of concept using IBM's Hyperledger network, using a permission network. So I'm going to dive right in. So we're using Nike as an example. So this is not the actual Nike website. So I'm going to sign up, for example. So let's say Nike 01. And this is Martha, using the example. So when Martha creates an account, this is the classic opt-in consent agreement. With GDPR, it's going to get more sophisticated. But in this case, we're using the traditional opt-in. So when you set accept, so I'm going to show you 2 nodes. So you can see that we have, in this case, a consent that we collected. Everybody can see that? So in the blockchain itself, we now have record that Martha has consented to have these data, her data used for these purposes. Okay. So let's say Martha logs in. she can now actually go to her privacy portal. And now she can see that these are the consents she's given by signing in. And this is when she actually opted in to have. So this is a way for her to view her consent that she's given on Nike.com. Okay, so now using the flow Christina was talking about, let's say Nike's running this campaign. So in this case, we're actually simulating the transfer of data. So in this case, we have Martha's information. In the back office, we're going to hit a transfer. So Nike's going to transfer data over to Epsilon.
So again, that's just an example.
Right. So you can see this, here's, again, in the blockchain, here's the receipt, and the data is from Nike to Epsilon, right? And then we'll do another transfer. Let's say Epsilon then is actually deploying, and it's going to serve an ad on Hulu. You can see in this case, the same kind of data transfer transaction is saved onto the blockchain. So what's important is actually now Martha herself can go to her own privacy portal. And she can see where all her data has gone, right? So before, without this blockchain, she goes to Nike. She knows Nike has her data, but she has no idea where her data has gone, right? And let's say she wants to change her consent. I think Neil earlier has said, okay, they can opt out. If we want to, without this blockchain, let's say we want to update. We want to remove the consent for a location. Right? You can see now the consent has been updated on the blockchain, and no longer location is available. And then we have this information. Now with this capability, now Epsilon and Hulu will get notified that the consent that they've been using for Martha's information has changed. And now they no longer have consent for using location data. Without this, there's no way for Martha to actually opt out. Martha will have to first know that you went to Epsilon and Hulu, and then Martha has to go to Epsilon and Hulu individually and do a subject access request, make sure that her data is there, and opt out. Right? It's a big pain for the individual consumer. And as Acxiom, it's also a big pain for a data provider when a user comes and opt in or opt out to able to propagate back to the source of the consent. So idea is to make it easier for every participant, from the data brokers, everyone in the supply chain, from the consumer, as well as the regulator. Now the regulator can go to one place and see where the consent and data provenance for the individual consumers are.
Thank you.
Any questions?
That's awesome.
Great.
So it seems like this is great for GDPR. Can you use it for other statutes and regulations?
Absolutely.
Like California.
Yes, yes. So we built this
Yeah.
thinking that GDPR is just the beginning, right? So all the regulations.
Yeah. The idea is this is going to be a GDPR-like privacy compliance platform, so it applies to any privacy legislation that is similar,
Right.
that kind of similarity.
Right.
Also, the idea is companies it's future-proof. So when there's a change in regulations, companies doesn't need to go back to their own system and make sure that things are aligned, because it will be built as a platform.
Just
Right.
a quick follow-up. So like on COPA, for example, we can track verifiable parental consent and components like that? Or is that, I don't know.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. So the idea is the consent can be any type of consent you want. So metadata about consent as well as the consent themselves. So consent is a metadata about private information, but you can also add additional. For example, I think when someone had asked Neil earlier that if you want only your data to be given to certain companies but not available to other companies, they can put that into the consent, and that would be in the blockchain as metadata. And then whoever has that data can read the consent and say, okay, I'm excluded from using this information. And so all that can be put into the system. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. So in your POC, you're working against a proprietary permission blockchain, right? But how do you give the confidence to the consumer that there is not manipulation of that record because it's not a public?
Okay, so that's why we have regulators as part of the consortium. And actually, if we want, we can have consumer advocacy groups who act on behalf of consumers be part of the consortium. The reason we didn't want it to be a public blockchain, yeah.
And this is a prototype, right? It's not yet at the product level.
Right, but the idea is,
The thinking is not yet gone into everything.
That's true.
Third-party actors whose their sole purpose is to validate or thesis and check, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
We have the last product showcase of today from Fusion 7, David Lombardi.